through them and left them lay right there along those trails that led from there up to the prison camp Cabutuan. If not, they used the bayonet. So all of those out, and those nurses and stuff like that, when we freed those nurses up there, and they were skin and bones, I had some pictures, I should have brought them with me, but they were skin and bones, and looked at them. They were repeatedly raped by the Japanese, and they were forced to take care of the Japanese wounded and stuff like that. And that's one group that was forgotten in our memories in memorials for Memorial Day, is the nurses from the Second World War and all the way up until today. The nurses in the Second World War, after they come out of Corregidor and they're there, and we released them. And what happened was, these nurses, they came out, and we freed them. They were put aboard hospital ships out in the bay of Corregidor there. Then the other people that we forgot and took praise was the Seabees. The Seabees were great. They were aboard transports, and they came in to the Philippines there and all the other islands. I had 9 battle stars, 3 Bronze Stars, I had Purple Hearts. I had 2 presidential citations, which, I mean, not only me, it was my outfit. And the Seabees came in there, and when they first came in, they came in as a civilian organization. They were not armed, and they were in there, and they were the ones with bulldozers and everything, went through these jungles and these islands, and they cleared it out, and they made landing strips for our fighter planes, our medium bombers, and our heavy bombers, and they worked there and worked there. One thing that strikes my mind is this. They were helping to unload a Liberty ship which had aviation gasoline on it in drums. They were down on the pontoons, and from the Liberty ship, they're lowering the gas tanks, barrels over to the pontoons. All of a sudden, out of the sun, which was a thing with the Japanese, they praised the sun. And the fighter planes came out of the sun, and they strapped. They hit these gasoline drums, and it was 6 Seabees on that thing. And it blew them just to Hades. You couldn't find parts or nothing for them. So these Seabees, not only that, but then later on they fought it, and the big contractors, civilian and stuff, and they got where they were get armed. And they got armed with small arms fire, that when they were out there, and no Jap snipers, and these snipers were cunning, and they were real smart. They were not dummies. These snipers would hide up in the palm trees, the coconut trees and stuff like that, and fire at our troops and fire at these fellas, and they knew they weren't armed. Finally they were armed, and they were able to defend themselves. Another group was the Merchant Marines. Nobody sees it, and all the Army books that came out, and movies and shows and this and stuff, do not mention those 3. The nurses, the Seabees, and the Merchant Marine. Without the Merchant Marine, we would not have had ammunition over there. We would not have had supplies to continue the battle over there. So I say all these outfits that weren't, celebrated. And in regards to her father, what happened was, when the Japs took over most of their prisoners, they did not just stay in the prison camps. Another prison camp was Santo Tomas, outside of Manila, and they had about 1,200 prisoners of war, and also Wall City. Yeah, also Wall City. And these prisoners of war were loaded aboard ships and taken into Japan to work in war production factories and stuff like that. So he evidently was transported as prisoner of war then to Japan, right? Yeah. So I say, these are things that we can't forget. And everyone, even the fellas today, in our wars today, they call them wars or police things, they go in there, they volunteer. We have no more draft. I registered for the draft when I was 18 years old in the Madison building on Bloomfield Avenue. And it wasn't too long, they needed bodies out there, and I was ready to go. So I said, I'll volunteer. But I say, the fellas out there today are playing Russian roulette with their bodies and their lives. They're going out there, they know they're going to come back or nothing. And then we come back and we'll go with the VA. The VA is not taking care of it because they got a lot of people in VA. I went to the VA about 16 times myself. And every time I went to them, there's some excuse of this and this and that. And they said, well, you got to come back in 6 months, you got to come back in 3 months and stuff like that. These fellas deserve something. And also our injured, our warriors that are out there. They're not the only ones suffer. It's their wives, their children, their parents who sit and cry and say, is this the way they came back? The other ones were buried, a lot of them on the islands over there, and the grave registration came in and buried them. And little white crosses, wood crosses marked where they were buried on these islands and stuff like that. Some were brought home, some are still buried over there. And on these crosses were their dog tag. Everybody that went into war was issued 2 dog tags. One was for them, and the other one was nailed to that little white cross. And the way I say, some came home, some didn't. But if there's a war veteran out there, it's not too hard to say, to back them up and get something for them. Like they say, give $19 a month or something like that to help out. What the hell's the matter with our government?